Quick question. What's the official language of the United States? English, right? You'd bet your life on it. You'd lose that bet. The United States of America, the most powerful nation on earth, 250 years old, 330 million people, has never, not once, had an official national language. Not at the founding. Not today. Not ever. No law says a president has to speak English. No law says your driver's license, your ballot, or your court hearing has to be in English. In fact, more than 30 states have passed their own official English laws over the decades, precisely because there was never one at the federal level to fall back on. So how did the most powerful country in the world end up with no official language at all? The answer says more about what America actually is than any anthem or flag ever could. Let's get into it. Here's the first surprise. The Constitutional Convention of 1787 barely discussed language at all. Go read the Constitution right now. You won't find the word English anywhere in it. Not in the preamble, not in the amendments, not in the fine print. The founders wrote an entire framework for how power would be divided, how laws would be made, how citizens would be represented, and they simply didn't address what language any of it should happen in. Why the silence? A few reasons come up again and again among historians. First, it seemed obvious. English was already the dominant language of law, commerce, and government in the colonies. To Madison, Franklin, and the rest, spelling it out might have felt as unnecessary as declaring that meetings would be held sitting down. Second, practical restraint. The founders were fighting over federal versus state power on nearly everything. Adding language policy to that fight, especially in a country that already had German-speaking communities in Pennsylvania, Dutch speakers in New York, French speakers in Louisiana, and dozens of indigenous languages spoken across the continent, may have seemed like opening a door nobody wanted to open. Third, there's a persistent legend that German almost became the national language, losing to English by a single vote in Congress. That's a myth. Historians trace it back to a 1795 vote about whether to print certain federal laws in German as well as English, which failed by one vote in a procedural sense. It was never a vote on a national language. But the myth has stuck around for over 2 centuries because it captures something true. Language diversity was baked into the country from day one. The founders left a blank space where other nations wrote a rule. And that blank space has stayed blank for 250 years. To understand why nobody filled in that blank, you have to understand just how multilingual America already was before it was even a country. By the late 1700s, German was spoken by huge communities in Pennsylvania. German-language newspapers, schools, and churches operated openly. French was dominant across much of Louisiana after its purchase in 1803. Spanish was the language of government and daily life across huge swaths of the Southwest and Florida, long before those territories became American. Dutch lingered in pockets of New York, a holdover from New Amsterdam. And hundreds of indigenous languages were spoken across the continent by nations who had been there for thousands of years before any European ship arrived. This wasn't a footnote. In the 19th century, cities like Cincinnati and Milwaukee ran public schools that taught in German alongside English. Louisiana conducted state legislative business in French well into the 1800s. Newspapers in Norwegian, Polish, Yiddish, and Italian flourished in immigrant neighborhoods from Chicago to New York. Then came the waves of immigration. Irish in the mid-1800s, Southern and Eastern Europeans at the turn of the 20th century, and later, Latin American and Asian immigration reshaping the linguistic map yet again. Each wave added languages. None of them replaced English as the practical common tongue of government and commerce, but none of them needed a law to tell them that, either. English became dominant through sheer demographic and economic weight, not through legislation. That's the pattern that's held for 2.5 centuries. English wins by default, not by decree. If nobody made English official at the start, surely someone tried to fix that later. They did. Many times. World War I was a turning point. Anti-German sentiment exploded, and several states banned German language instruction in schools, some going as far as banning the language in public entirely. This got challenged all the way to the Supreme Court. In Meyer v. Nebraska, 1923, The Supreme Court struck down a Nebraska law banning foreign language instruction, ruling it violated the 14th Amendment's protections. It was an early, important precedent. The government could not simply mandate linguistic uniformity by force. The modern official English movement picked up steam in the 1980s, driven largely by concerns about rising Spanish language use and bilingual education debates. Organizations like U.S. English were founded to push for a constitutional amendment declaring English the official language of the United States. That amendment has been introduced in Congress more than once. It has never passed both chambers. Meanwhile, roughly 32 states have passed their own state-level official English laws. Louisiana and Hawaii stand out as exceptions, given their historical French and native Hawaiian ties. But at the federal level, every attempt has stalled. Why does it keep failing nationally when it succeeds at the state level? A few recurring arguments show up on both sides of this debate. Those in favor of a national official English law argue it would promote civic unity and a shared national identity. It could reduce government costs tied to multilingual services and materials. It reflects, in their view, the practical reality that English already functions as the common language. Those opposed argue the Constitution was deliberately silent on this, and that silence has served the country well for 250 years. Official language laws can be used to marginalize immigrant and indigenous communities and have historically been tied to nativist movements. English dominance persists anyway through economic and social pressure. No law is needed to reinforce something that isn't actually under threat. It could complicate access to voting, courts, and emergency services for non-English speakers, particularly the elderly. This is a live political debate today, not a settled historical question, and reasonable people land in very different places on it. As of now, there is still no federal official language. But the landscape has shifted in one significant way worth knowing about. In March 2025, a presidential executive order designated English as the official language of the United States federal government, the first time any such designation has existed at the federal level. It rescinded a prior requirement from a 2000 executive order that federal agencies provide language assistance to non-English speakers, though it left agencies discretion to continue offering multilingual services if they chose. This was an executive order, not an act of Congress, meaning it operates differently than a law passed by the legislature, and its permanence depends on future administrations and any legal challenges. It marks a real shift in the decades-long story, even though it's not the constitutional amendment that official English advocates have pushed for since the 1980s. Meanwhile, the practical reality on the ground remains what it's been for generations. English dominates government, business, and media by sheer usage, while Spanish, Chinese, Tagalog, Vietnamese, Arabic, and dozens of other languages thrive in homes, communities, and increasingly, in local government services. Ballots printed in multiple languages, court interpreters, multilingual 911 dispatch, and bilingual education programs, all operating without a federal mandate either requiring or forbidding them at the constitutional level. Here's the bigger picture worth sitting with. Most countries with an official language use that designation to answer a question about identity. Who belongs? Whose language the state recognizes? What unifies the nation? America answered that question differently. It let the practical dominance of English do the work that a law does everywhere else, while leaving the legal door open for a country that was multilingual before it was even a country, and has stayed multilingual every single day since. That's not an accident of bureaucratic laziness. It's a reflection of a genuinely unresolved argument, over a quarter of a millennium old, about whether American identity is built on a shared language or whether it's built on something else entirely. Shared laws, shared institutions, shared citizenship, regardless of what language you speak at your own kitchen table. The founders left that blank space in 1787. Whether it should stay blank is a question the country is still actively arguing about today. So, no official language, 250 years, and counting. Not because nobody tried. Because every time someone tried to fill in that blank, the country pushed back, or the moment passed, or the debate reopened all over again. What do you think? Should the U.S. have an official national language? Drop your take in the comments. I read every one. And if you want the deep dive on how the 2025 executive order actually changes federal agency operations, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.